Hey guys, it's Cece, and today I am going to talk about all of the series that I've completed. Beginning to end, that's all the books there are ever going to be in the series. I've read them all. I'm going to talk about those. So, as it turns out, I have a ton of these. I have read 39 complete series since I started counting, probably around like middle school, junior high age. So I'm going to try to show you the covers of all of these and try to give you a little bit of information about what they're about, but I have 39 series, so I've got to get through this really quickly. We need to get started, like, now. So first up I have the Gideon Trilogy by Linda Buckley Archer. There are 3 books in this series. Obviously, it's a trilogy. We have the Time Travelers, the Time Thief, and the Time Quake. Next up I have the Unlikely Exploits by Philip Ardagh. I don't know how to say his name. This is a middle grade trilogy that is very much in the vein of A Series of Unfortunate Events. In the series we have The Fall of Fergal, The Heir of Mystery, and The Rise of the House of McNally. Next up I have the Looking Glass Wars trilogy, that is a young adult trilogy retelling Alice in Wonderland, but like really intense. Like these card soldiers here, as you can tell, are really awesome. These are by Frank Bedore, and you've got the Looking Glass Wars, Seeing Red, seriously, that's like the Queen of Hearts, how insane. Okay, Arch Enemy. Next up we have one of my favorite series, and that is the Graceling Trilogy by Christina Shore. This series is amazing, and they're also really beautiful books. So in this series we have Graceling, Fire, and Bitter Blue. Like, how gorgeous are these covers, okay? Next up we have the Spiderwick Chronicles by Holly Black and Tony DiTerlizzi, I think is how you pronounce his name. There are 5 books in this series. It is a middle grade series that is just a lot of fun. So we have the first book, The Field Guide. There's also The Seeing Stone, Lucinda's Secret, The Ironwood Tree, and The Wrath of Mulgarath. Next up, I am going to talk about The Anybody's by N.E. Bode, also known as Juliana Baggett, I believe, is her real name. So this is an amazing middle grade series, but we have the Anybody's, the Nobodies, and the Somebodies. The next series I have is the Artemis Fowl series by Owen Colfer. Oh no. There are so many. I only have the first 6 books. There are technically 8 books in the series, but I have read all 8. And the books in the series are Artemis Fowl, The Arctic Incident, The Eternity Code, The Opal Deception, The Lost Colony, and The Time Paradox. And the last 2 are called The Atlantis Complex and The Last Guardian. Next we have an obvious one, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, the whole Hunger Games trilogy. If you don't know what this is about, I don't even know, like, where you've been. Like, come on, be real. But in this series, we have The Hunger Games, Catching Fire, and Mockingjay. Next up, we have the Matched Trilogy by Ali Condi. Whatcha? These have beautiful covers, I just want to say that. But this is another dystopian series. In this series, we have Matched, Crossed, and Reached. Next up, we have the Maze Runner books. There are 4 books in this series, not 3, if you've been led to believe that there are 3. Incorrect, there are 4. This is a really good series. And in this series we have The Maze Runner, The Scorched Trials, The Death Cure, and the prequel, The Kill Order. Next up we have the Books of Ember. There are 4 books in this series. I used to own all 4, but now I just have 2. But in this series you have The City of Ember, The People of Sparks, and then you have The Prophet of Yonwood, and The Diamond of Darkhold. Next up, we have the Serpent Trilogy. This was a book that I loved as a child and have since realized is not very good. So this is the first book, Serpent, and then there's the second book, Widow's Revenge, and then Diamondback Cave. Next up, we have the Ink World Trilogy. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. I love this series so much, by Cornelia Funk. So in this series, we have Inkheart, Ink Spell, and Ink Death, which is a thick one, but so good. Next up we have Dragon Slippers, the trilogy by Jessica Day George. This is a young adult series about dragons. It's really fun. The first book is Dragon Slippers, and then you have Dragon Flight, Dragon Spear. Next up we have my first duology, and that is the Austenland duology by Shannon Hale. This is Shannon Hale's adult duology. So they have the first book, Austenland, and then the second one, which is pretty disconnected from the first one, but it's still good, Midnight in Austenland. Next up, we have the Books of Bayern by Shannon Hale. There are 4 books in this series, and in this series we have The Goose Girl, Edda Burning, River Secrets, and Forest Born. Next up, we have the Gone series by Michael Grant. There are 6 books in this series. I only own 4, but this is a totally fantastic series if you haven't read it. We have Gone, Hunger, Lies, then there's Plague, and then Fear, and then the last book, Light. Time for another contemporary duology. We have the 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. This is just a contemporary book that I really enjoyed, and I'm going to be rereading soon. And the second book is The Last Little Blue Envelope, which is not nearly as good. You can really just stick with this first one. Then we have The Green Mile by Stephen King. I'm counting this as a series because it came out in a bunch of serial novels, and I read it as 6 different books. This is my favorite Stephen King that I've read. They're really amazing, and they have the best movie adaptation of a book that I've ever seen. Wow. Next up we have The Time Quintet by Madeline L'Engle. The first book is A Wrinkle in Time and is definitely my favorite, but there are 5 books in this series. You also have A Wind in the Door, A Swiftly Tilting Planet, Many Waters, and An Acceptable Time. Next I've got the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, all 7 books in this beautiful box set, and this is just a really, I just love Chronicles of Narnia so much. I haven't read them in a really long time and I need to. But in this series we have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, The Horse and His Boy, The Magician's Nephew, and The Last Battle. Next up I have The Giver Quartet by Lois Lowry. Or I have half of The Giver Quartet here with me, because The Giver's at school. So there are 4 books in this series. The Giver, which is my favorite book of all time. I've read it 20 times. I adore The Giver. But then we also have Gathering Blue, Messenger, and the 4th book, Sun, which I don't own yet, but I'd like to because I actually really liked Sun. Next up we have the Hourglass Door Trilogy by Lisa Mangum. This is a very fun series. So we have The Hourglass Door, The Golden Spiral, and The Forgotten Locket. Next up I have the Fablehaven books by Brandon Mull. Oh no, they're falling. So there are 5 books total in this series. This is a middle grade fantasy series. And we have in this series Fablehaven, Fablehaven Rise of the Evening Star, Fablehaven Grip of the Shadow Play, Fablehaven Secrets of the Dragon Sanctuary, and Fablehaven Keys to the Demon Prison. Alright, time for my second favorite series of all time, and that is the Chaos Walking Trilogy by Patrick Ness. There are 3 books that are beautiful in both look and what's on the inside. We have The Knife of Never Letting Go, The Ask and the Answer, and Monsters of Men. Next up, we have the Delirium Trilogy by Lauren Oliver. I didn't love this trilogy, so I sold it back, but I have read all 3 of them. And so we have Delirium, and then the second book, Pandemonium, and then Requiem. I knew when I was gonna do this was gonna be one of the hardest ones to lift. The next one I have is The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. Okay, I had fun. This is a young adult high fantasy series with dragons. It's amazing. I love this series. We have Aragon, Eldest, my favorite book in the series, Brissinger, and of course, Inheritance. Next up, I have Percy Jackson and the Olympians by Rick Riordan. I do not own all 5 books in this series, but I read them back in junior high and loved them. So we have The Lightning Thief, The Sea of Monsters, Book 3, The Titan's Curse, Book 4, The Battle of the Labyrinth, and Book 5, The Last Olympian. Next we have the Divergent Trilogy by Veronica Roth. The second one is missing, because my sister borrowed it, but I have Divergent, then there's Book 2, Insurgent, and finally Book 3, Allegiant. Alright, next up, we all know I've read all of these. We have the entire Harry Potter series. I just finished my reread, so people who said they weren't sure I was going to be able to do it, I did it. I finished Deathly Hallows yesterday. So, in this series we have Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. The best series that there is. The best. The best. Next up, we have the Everlost Trilogy by Neil Shusterman. If you have read the Unwind Dystology by him, I highly encourage you to go and read this series because it is very good also, and does not get enough love. But in this book we have Ever Lost, Ever Wild, and Ever Found. The next series I have is another middle grade series, and that is the 11 Thump series by Obert Sky. There are 5 books. This is so hard. So the 5 books in this series are 11 Thumps and the Gateway to Fu, 11 Thumps and the Whispered Secret, 11 Thumps and the Eyes of the Want, 11 Thumps and the Wrath of Ezra, and 11 Thumps and the Ruins of Alder. Alright guys, the next series is a series of unfortunate events, and let's be real, I'm just not going to pull out all 13 books from this series, but this series was very important to me as a child. This is a middle grade series that totally influenced me as a reader, and I love Lemony Snicket. Wow, I just whacked myself in the face. Lemony Snicket is very important to me as a writer, and this series is just amazing. I loved all 13 books, plus the Beatrice letters. Next up we have the Glass series by Maria V. Snyder. There are 3 books in this. This is a series that comes after the Poison Study trilogy, although I have not read the Poison Study trilogy. But in this series we have Stormglass, Sea Glass, and Spyglass. Next up, I have the Stargirl Duology by Jerry Spinelli. There are 2 books in this series, but I promise you the second book is not worth your time. So we have Stargirl, which is amazing, and then there's Love Stargirl, which is really not nearly as good as the first book. Next up, we have the wow, that was nice. The John Cleaver books by Dan Wells. This series was good when I first read it, and then I got a little older, and then I didn't appreciate it anymore, so I got rid of my copies. But there are 3 books in the series. Currently, he's also doing a spin-off series. The 3 books in this series that were the John Cleaver books are I Am Not a Serial Killer, Mr. Monster, and I Don't Want to Kill You. Next, we're almost close to the end, is the Midnighters Trilogy by Scott Westerfeld. In this series, we have Midnighters, The Secret Hour, and then Book 2, Touching Darkness, and Book 3, Blue Noon. Next up, we have a classic, one that I loved reading, and just was amazing to me when I was younger, and that is the Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read all of these books, all of them, plus a couple of the ones that were like written by her daughter, which aren't very good, but I read all of these books. So in this series we have Little House in the Big Woods, Little House in the Prairie, Farmer Boy, On the Banks of Plum Creek, By the Shores of the Silver Lake, The Long Winter, Little Town on the Prairie, These Happy Golden Years, and The First 4 Years. Beautiful. And finally, this is the last one. The last one that I've read is a duology, and that is the Boxers and Saints duology by Jean Lewin Yang. This is a graphic novel, clearly, and they are fantastic. There you go, guys. Those are the 39 series that I've completely finished. Thank you for watching. At some point, I will do some other videos of series that I'm caught up on, or series that I've decided to never finish. Those will be in the future, but for now, I hope you've enjoyed these. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the series that I've read, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye!